When your leadership skills aren't quite there, does your team tell you? When your friends doubt your abilities to do something, do you listen to them? Feedback can come to us in many dizzying forms. Constriction and guidance are the two sides of the feedback coin, but sometimes we have to squint to tell which is which. Starting off as one of Toronto's youngest clinical psychologists, Cindy Wahler faced constant doubt. She was told that she'd never make it, that the climb would be too steep. But today she uses her understanding of psychology to consult for organizations like Ralph Lauren, Exxon Mobile, and Toyota on effective leadership development. She regularly types up articles for Forbes, CNN, and Huffington Post. She also bakes cookies. Always on the lookout for new projects, Cindy started Bite Me Cookies back in 2021. Once again, she was swarmed by naysayers. There were aspects of the business that required her to develop totally new skills, like learning to market through social media. But as you'll quickly realize, Cindy's secret weapon is her ability to navigate feedback. A few years later, and Bite Me Cookies has become something of a Torontonian phenomenon, with over 20 varieties of cookies on offer and expansions into other desserts like pies and hot chocolate. You're about to hear Cindy's best advice on receiving feedback as a leader. She breaks down different kinds of feedback, how they can either help or hinder you, and plenty of practical tips on how to pivot based on the feedback you receive. I'm Catherine Vasilopoulos, and this is And So She Left, the podcast about incredible women founders and the wisdom they uncovered beyond the corporate world. When Cindy's son was growing up, their house was the center of the universe. Cindy took the lead to make it an inviting space for him and his friends, often placing her delicious cookies on the counter. She was even told that she should open a cookie business. And before Bite Me Cookies was ever a serious consideration, Cindy applied her understanding of leadership psychology to a much different field. Being in a leadership position or talking about leadership, it doesn't come easy to everyone. Like, how did you decide that that's what you wanted to do?
It's a great question. And you're right, it doesn't come easy to everyone. And not everyone wants to have a leadership position. Not everyone wants to lead people. And sometimes managers are promoted when they really didn't want to lead people. In terms of how I went into it, I see that as a crossover between my previous role as a psychologist and now as a leadership consultant, because it is about what drives people, what type of role do you need to have, what type of work do you want to do, and how do you want to, if you do, want to make a difference and leave a legacy. And as you suggest, Catherine, not everyone naturally comes to a leadership position knowing how to cultivate others. And so that's where I come in to teach those kind of leadership skills, which has a lot to do with having emotional intelligence, active listening skills, the art of negotiation, collaboration, partnering. So it is a complex set of skills.
Okay, that's exciting because you just took the words out of my next question is what are the qualities that are required for a modern day leader? Because we have seen all kinds over the last few decades, but in today's world, we need to figure out, well, what does it take in order for people to survive as leaders now?
It's a great question. First off, I think, in previous generations, it used to be that we were told as employees to leave your personal life at the door and come in as the employee with your worker persona on. Great leaders today recognize that we all have personal family challenges that do interface with our day-to-day lives. And so leaders need to be sensitive to that there are certain periods in our lives where there are challenges that we need to be sensitive to. So that's one. I also think that as a leader, it's important that you're giving ongoing feedback to your employees around how they are performing, how they're showing up, what they're really good at, make them feel valued, and also what the opportunity is for development so that they can be even more impactful. Great leaders have what I call a humble level of confidence. So that means that they are able to inspire and motivate others, but at the same time, they're able to be vulnerable, able to be wrong, and they take in information and diverse perspectives because they're not the smartest person in the room, and that they need to collaborate with others. I strongly believe that nobody is successful by themselves. And so even the most talented leaders need to surround themselves with experts.
I like what you said there. It's like you're not always the smartest person in the room, but you do need to recognize how to find other people's strengths. And that creates a much better work environment and lets people feel validated in their roles.
Absolutely.
A big part of people's identity is, work. It is a definition in part of who you are at any given moment during your life.
Absolutely.
What happens after you decide that you've gone through the first two careers in your life, so to speak, and then what happened next?
So what happened next is first of all, just to know a little bit about me, I have a very low threshold for boredom. And so that combined with liking to take risks, having a sense of curiosity and breaking rules, I tell everybody that I failed as an employee. So I worked within a corporation early on in my career for a total of 3 years when I realized that for me, I wasn't the best fit with a lot of bureaucracy, a lot of process, a lot of procedure. And so it did spur me to go out on my own. So, alongside my leadership development practice, I did a number of things. One, I recently wrote a book on effective attributes for leaders. And at the same time, because I love to bake, I decided this would be a good opportunity for me to open a baking business called Bite Me Cookie, which is on Instagram. And it's been around for just a little under 3 years now. And I now have over 20 cookie flavors and at least 12 to 15 other desserts from tiramisu to cheesecake to other kinds of desserts like tarte tatin, apple pie bars, and many other sweets.
Oh, yeah. Anyone who knows me knows I've been on a diet recently, and eating any of those things has been so restrictive. So just the name, ta and all that. Oh, okay, delicious. Uh, so how did you decide that, okay, you took a passion that many people have, many people bake, but then you decide, okay, but this can turn into a business. What was the thought process there?
Well, I actually didn't have many thoughts except to say that I will try this. And I always say this to myself, what is the actual worst that could happen? The worst that could happen is that I will fail, but at least I will try this. And so I don't in life want to have regrets that I should have, could have. And I think there's great credit we should give to each other and to everybody who tries something, even if something is not successful. So I did not at the time, 2.5 years ago, have an Instagram account. And I had to learn how to navigate that and then compete in a world where there's many, as you know, baked goods.
Yes,
So
yes.
it was a learning curve. And the more challenging something is, the more competitive I become, not with other people, but I become competitive with myself. And so when people say to me, it's unlikely that you'll be able to do this, or it's unlikely that you'll be successful, it just actually is a great motivator. It spurs me on to work harder and to showcase that it is possible.
Tell me more about that. Like, what if people told you when you told them, this is my idea now, this is what I'm launching into? What if people said to you, and how did you react? Yeah.
Sure. Well, there was varied reactions, Catherine, from why would you do that? I don't understand that. You already are successful. You already are established. You already are so busy. Why would you do it? Well, what if you're too successful? And I said, well, what does that mean? Well, if you're too successful and you can't manage it. So I said, well, that's a good problem to have, but that's not a reason not to do it. And other things like, it won't work because, you're probably late to the game. There are established businesses in this discipline, in this sector. And When I think about my success over my various careers, I like to think of myself as a serial entrepreneur. It has to do with one thing, and that is I surround myself with experts. And so I do a lot of research. I get a lot of advice. I listen to the pros and cons. And then it's up to me then to distill all that feedback, see what is the right kind of feedback, and determine whether I should forge ahead. And I do strongly believe that expertise around me is what has allowed me to be successful in any endeavor I do.
Do you think that people are projecting their own anxieties onto you when they say certain things that are negative?
Oh, absolutely. I think that's very well said. And, when I wrote my book on leadership, the same thing was like, oh my goodness, it's going to take you forever. What if you never finish it? What if it's not published? What if you don't sell a copy? And sure, all those things are reality. That's possible. Those are real possibilities. And so a lot of people have a lot of dreams and ideas, but most people don't execute. So they can offer advice around here's what I should do, you should do, and they have a lot of their own aspirations, but sadly don't put that into operation, don't execute on it because it's just too anxiety provoking and it's too overwhelming.
Yes, and many people don't know how to tap into their own personal courage because it's
That's
so
right.
much easier. It's so much easier to say, I won't do it because I'm not sure I'll be a success at it. And then you start doubting yourself and saying, okay, well, I'll just sit here and watch TV instead of actually going for whatever it is that I'm dreaming about. And
Which is a
that's,
safer route.
yes,
And so
very
when we
safe.
take the safer route, there's less risk. You are more protected and there's less opportunity for failure. But when we take the safer route, there's also less opportunity for success.
Mm-hmm.
My days are much longer because I might be getting up at 5 a.m. to bake, and I do a lot of private events now. I do a lot of corporate events, and so it has grown, and it's just an exciting place to be.
It is exciting. It is. You keep adding layers to your skill set and all the successes that you're having. And I'm very curious to know what kind of big challenges have you overcome by doing this?
So I think the primary challenge has to do with just learning and not having any knowledge about particular industry. So when I moved from clinical psychology into leadership consulting, then I had to understand effective leadership may mean one thing in one company, it may mean something else in another. And also, as mentioned with my cookie business, I didn't really understand how Instagram worked, how I had to promote, how social media is such an integral part of the marketing arm. And I think at the end of the day, if I look across the various careers that I have had and have, there is a common theme, and that is about being able to listen to the feedback that you get. What are your clients asking of you? What do your customers want? And can you pivot and adapt to that feedback? And so that you don't stay rigid, but that you're aligned with what the market is telling you you need to be delivering.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Did you ever wonder or feel that this isn't going to work, or I'm not good enough, or there's already too many people in this? Did you
All
ever
the
have those
time.
moments? Yeah,
All the
yeah.
time. Those moments are pervasive and they come and they go. And I try to engage in self talk and, use logic and reason to combat some of that internal negative talk. That's always there. Am I only as good as my last coaching engagement, my last team facilitation, my last batch of cookies? For sure, that's there. But I want to forge ahead and keep going. Because one day I won't be able to. So why wouldn't I do it?
How do you build the self-esteem muscle that goes with becoming an entrepreneur?
So I think there are a number of traits that entrepreneurs share. We are very hard on ourselves. We are very driven. We do have a sense of curiosity. We like to take risks. We don't really like to follow rules. And we see opportunities where others don't see that opportunity. And so even if there's some failure and a learning curve, as long as there's a little bit of success, that's what keeps me going, and that I can sort of learn to adjust. So when I first started, for example, the cookie business, it was exclusively cookies. And then I thought about it. I thought, well, if I expand my offerings and my current customer base is loyal, would they not want a chocolate cake with chocolate truffle ganache? Wouldn't they? Would they not want tiramisu? And so it is about learning not to stand still. And then with each risk I take, if there's positive feedback, that does help my self-esteem.
Yes, yes. And having external validation to some point, I guess.
Absolutely. If I sell my book, then I know that it must be worthy. People must be reading it. And on average, my corporate clients have been my clients for anywhere between 5 to 18 years now. So the way I look at it is, senior leaders, executives come and go, but there's a core set of leaders that endorse what I'm doing, feel that they're getting good return on the leadership services that I offer. And so that also makes me feel valued, and that they're getting a good ROI, and that there's an impact that I have.
That's so well said. You look at how your clients are responding to your services or your products, and the continued business, the returning business, that says everything. It's even more powerful than any awards or accolades that you may get. It's this returning client concept in business.
Absolutely. It's very hard to get a client in the first place, but it's much harder to get repeat business. And so that's what I never take for granted. I don't assume that I'll be invited back. I have to prove myself, and I have to continue to prove myself and continue to win and earn that trust on a repeated basis. So it goes back to that humility and that balance between being self-assured, but being open to making mistakes, being wrong, adjusting, and acknowledging when you're wrong.
Yes, yes, you're always navigating and readjusting course as things emerge. And you just mentioned a very interesting word there, which is trust. And funny enough that you say that, all of my invoices to my clients at the bottom say, "Thank you for your trust and your business."
That's
Because
fantastic. I love
without the
that
trust,
tagline.
oh, thank you. Without that trust, you don't get to go any further with them. You need to have this two-way trust that you will deliver what you said you're going to deliver, and then they will appreciate what you've done and then pay you in kind. So it's a two-way street, and no one's trying to screw anybody over. It really has to be about that.
Absolutely.
So,
And I
yeah.
think that's the foundation to all relationships, whether it's personal, family, private, intimate, business. It really is the kind of marker that has to be built, as you suggest. So I
Yes, yes.
agree.
Let me ask you this then. What kind of advice would you give aspiring entrepreneurs or people who are on the fence, or even people who have had, just like you, multiple careers over their life?
I think a number of things. So one is, I like to tell people that they don't just have one skill set. You don't just have one professional or work identity, that most of our skills are transferable. So, if you are in a relationship based business, regardless of what business you're in, if you're great at communicating, if you're great at relationships, then you can transfer those skills to a different sector. So it is about thinking about not just that you're proficient in one SKU or in one discipline. So that's the first thing. Two, I think that you do need to ask yourself the question, what is the absolute worst that could happen? So if you leave your job, if you leave your employer to go out on your own and it doesn't work out, you can always get a job with, yes, a different employer, but you can always go back to being an employee. But at least you have tried that, you explored that. I think that it is critical to surround yourself with people who have expertise, wisdom, and listen to what they have to say. And they're going to ask you fantastic questions. When people ask you great questions, it causes certainly me, to think harder and to work harder at articulating what my vision is, what my passion is, and how I'm going to operationalize it. So the more you talk about it, whether it's with experts or whether it's at your dinner party or cocktail party, the more it advances your thinking. And then I think the other point is that nothing stays the same. So whatever allows you to be successful when you first start, you shouldn't look at your business as static. And so how do you need to change? Pay attention to what consumers are saying, because consumers have the most power, and you need to listen to what they want, what they need, what they don't like, what they like. And if you could adjust, then you're staying relevant. If you don't adjust to what consumers want, then you will be historical, and then you won't be able to sustain your business.
Oh my God, that last one is so true. I love that piece of advice, to just remain relevant and to keep your ear to the ground and know what your clients want. Because then you become dinosaur. We get to a certain age, there's new people coming onto the market all the time. Markets get saturated. And so you always need to have a differentiating point. And you also need to know what your clients want for them not to go to see the competitor. Give me some examples of what people have told you when they say to you, oh, this is not a good business idea, or like, tell me a bit about that history where you've had to make multiple leaps from one thing to the other to the other.
Yeah. Sure. So when I started as a clinical psychologist and I knew I wanted to go out on my own, and I went to talk to a lot of psychologists, even those ones who already were in independent practice. I wouldn't be a threat to them because they were very established. They suggested that I shouldn't do it because the burden would be huge. It would be highly stressful. And where was I going to get my clients anyways? And it would be tough. And so that was some of the feedback. And all those things are true. Yes, the ownership of looking after people's well-being, I can't understate it. And so I needed to understand, okay, well, how do I differentiate myself as a psychologist? Where is the niche? What target area? What area of the city? And so I was particular about where to set up shop, what my practice was going to be about, and how I was going to develop relationships with family doctors that were going to help build my practice. So, that's an example of taking some of the naysayers and listening to that feedback as it is accurate, but it doesn't have to be something that's going to shut me down. And the same thing with leadership. Well, the comments were, well, what do you know about business? You don't understand business. And I said, that's true. I don't understand business, but I understand people because I studied people and I understand human behavior. And we do know that for organizations to be successful, no matter how innovative a product is or how extraordinary a product is, it's the people that are going to make that company successful.
Tell me what you've learned about people over the years.
Well, I think I've learned that every single person, regardless of their veneer, is vulnerable. So whether somebody may show up as arrogant or the smartest person in the room or knowing everything. I do remember, for example, I had a very first meeting with a coaching client, and he said to me after 5 minutes, Cindy, if anyone should be coaching anybody, I should be coaching you. And and so I paused and laughed and I said, okay, what would you like to coach me on? And he said, well, you don't know anything about my business. I'm going to teach you about my business. And I said, well, in fairness to you, I will only be able to understand a very primitive level. This is your area of expertise. The way I took it was that at the end of the day, even though he was quite bold and blustery, he probably was threatened by our relationship or the coaching engagement. And my goal was to make him feel safe, win his trust. And so when you ask me about what have I learned about people, I think that every one of us does need to feel valued and respected. What we do need to understand is that everyone has a different definition of how they feel valued. For some, it may be compensation. For others, maybe it's a title. For others, maybe it's helping and developing others. So it's really important for leaders to understand what motivates their team. What is it that their direct reports want? And If they have 8 direct reports, I'm going to guess they're going to get 8 different answers. And so that's, one of my clients once said to me, how many leadership styles do I need to have? And I said, well, as many as the people that you actually lead.
So, Cindy, let me ask you this then. So, in many companies, departments use data as a way to make business decisions. But do you think that there is something that has to be said about using the human element in making decisions when it comes to marketing or placement or any other parts of the business?
100%. So I really like this question. And you're right, there is numerical data or metrics. But when I'm working with individuals, senior leaders, and executives, and when I'm working with teams, I always say to them, you have a perception of how you are showing up. You think that you are maybe a fantastic marketer, or that you're highly strategic, or you excel at operations. Maybe you do, and that might be true. But it's also important to get feedback on the ground informally. So I suggest to them that they do a 360 and they go to their stakeholders, not their usual cast of characters, because the usual cast of characters are our fan club, so people that we work with closely, but more partners that we have, and ask them, how do you see me? What is my leadership brand? And that I want to be able to enhance my skill set. And even though I might think that I'm a good team player, maybe I am not a good team player because I don't listen. And if I don't listen, then I'm not getting all the perspectives. I'm not getting diversity of thought. And that's going to affect our results as a business.
Do you find that companies are using the human element enough, or are they still using the hard metrics and the data?
I think the companies that are much more progressive, much more sophisticated, understand the importance of it. And, we have obvious examples of where companies don't, and these companies no longer exist because they didn't pay attention to getting this information on the human element front, whether it's from internal feedback, because I like to look at employees as our consumers as well. Employees are your first level consumers, and they need to be happy. If they're not going to be happy, then how could the external consumers, their clients, be happy as well?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yes.
yes,
And
some
what
companies are much better at it than others.
Yes, and you're right. They do thrive because they're more connected to what's going on out there. And tell me more about the categories of feedback that exist. Is there such a thing?
Well, I think that the categories of feedback, it depends on what you're after. So, and it depends on what your goals are. Quite often, a lot of my clients, for example, need to learn how to make the leap between being a manager and being a leader. And being a leader means having executive presence. And they need to understand, what does it mean to have executive presence? And how do you set boundaries? And how do you be compelling? And how do you sell your point of view? So there's
Mm-hmm.
different measures for sure.
Yes. And how do you train someone like that? How do you train someone going from an employee status to then being in a more managerial or leadership position? I'm not even sure if that's the same thing. I think a manager is one thing, but a leader is more a function or a quality. Tell me what you think about that.
You're so right. You're so right, Catherine. And it's why I'm so busy, because there's a distinction. Managers to me get stuff done,
Mm-hmm.
and that at the end of the day, there are various deliverables and targets, and leaders facilitate and get things done through other people. And so that is a huge difference. And you're right. A lot of companies require training or don't have training because they just assume if you've been successful as a manager, you will be successful as a leader. And to where you're going with this, that's not true. The leadership training needs to be provided unless somebody is just naturally adept at it.
And are leaders expected to be the ideas people in the team, or that's not the case?
Not necessarily. You're right. I think they can, if they are able to bring out the best in others and showcase that team members do have great ideas, then that's part of their job, to coach and develop and look at not coming in with the answer. Maybe they have an answer or an approach, but maybe team members have a different approach. And if they set up the dialogue
Mm-hmm.
to allow for that diversity of perspective, then 1+1 doesn't equal 2. And usually the outcome is a much richer solution than if they didn't vet their team.
I see. Yeah, you have a very strong understanding of that world. And one last question. What's one magic ingredient in a cookie and in a business?
Wow. Okay. You made me step back. Now I have to think hard, Catherine. I think the magic ingredient is to be able to persevere. And so feedback that I have received from family and friends and colleagues is that I'm intense. And that's accurate. I am intense. And so I keep going. And again, when someone says no, I want to find a way around that. I will be a good sport only after I've exhausted all possibilities. So I think the magic ingredient is perseverance and self-discipline.
And in the cookie?
Well, it's the same thing. I mean, I think the same thing about, persevering to make a better and better product, a more inviting product, and have diversity in my products is the same thing about being tenacious and never settling, never compromising, never taking your eye off the ball, ever.
Thank you so much to Cindy Wahler. You can learn more about Bite Me Cookies through the link in the episode description. If you like the show, please rate, review, and subscribe to And So She Left wherever you listen. Your feedback helps us to better serve current listeners and reach new ones. You can also fill out our quick feedback form. It's just 5 questions long, and your response helps us to make the show that you want to hear. And So She Left is made by Cansulta and Ethan Lee. We'll be back next Wednesday with a new episode. Our music is by Chris Zabriskie, edited for your enjoyment, and you can find a list of all the songs you heard here in the episode notes. I'm Catherine Vasilopoulos, and thanks for listening.